Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taormina.
Welcome to OAA Now. Here I'm Sammy Taormina, blogger on the OAA, the host of Last City Brain Cells, and the host of Between 2 Minutes on Orion Television. I'd like to welcome those watching on the local voice on SoundCloud and those watching on Orion Television. A lot to recap here this week here on this edition of the podcast. The city of Rochester reigns supreme in the cheerleading ranks again. Stony Creek, of course, edging out Rochester by, I think, 0.6 of a percentage point. And then Adams taking third. So the city of Rochester dominating the Division I state competitive cheerleading landscape. Is there anybody that could stop the city of Rochester? I don't really think there is going to be for the next maybe 5-10 years. I just don't think that's going to be the case. And then we're going to also look at basketball, boys basketball districts. Cannot believe the reality that there's only 3 OA teams left in boys basketball. Also, we're going to recap the week that was in girls basketball on this week's edition of the podcast. So, without further ado, let's start off with the district playoffs and boys basketball. Hard to believe that there's only 3 teams left from the OA in Farmington, Rochester, and Troy Athens. I mean, who would have thought that, considering you look at the rankings have been all year long, just how everything's been. I mean, you really look at the main storylines here. Considering you look at the start that Farmington had, to the year. I mean, like, Farmington had a really nice year. But everything that turned around for them was that game in the district semifinals against arch rival North Farmington, where they ended up winning that one 69-60. I know it was a really tight game. I know North Farmington did not play really well. And then they had and then seeing both negotiations, Tom and Todd book at technical fouls in that game. That was a difference maker there. And then they had to survive Livonia Stevenson 55-51 in the district final there. For Farmington, it's a big win for Coach Byron Johnson. Big opportunity for Farmington to make some noise. Now they're gonna have a really tall task ahead of them in the regional. So we're gonna preview the regional when they go to Detroit Renaissance and take on Wayne Memorial, which is going to be a really difficult matchup for them when you look at that scenario there. Then let's look at Rochester. Rochester, you look at with them, they were the number 1 seed in their district. They had to get by. They got by Romeo in a hard-fought game there, knocking the Bulldogs out for, and then they had to survive Rochester Adams 44-42 behind a buzzer beater from Logan Pleasant. So when you look at Logan Pleasant, you think about Max Moe and Jake Tandy. I mean, that's what you think about when Coach Nick Abola's team. But Logan Pleasant, let's not forget, part of the Pleasant family tradition there. You got Logan Pleasant, you got John Pleasant. Obviously what they've done at Rochester University, I still call them that. You know what I mean? Like, even though they've changed the names now over there at Rochester. I think they're calling it Rochester Christian now over there, considering everything that's been going on over there. But with Rochester, this is a program that's on the rise. And the reason why I say this is because you look at the program strength that the freshman team has over there and the JV team that they had over there. Both teams were really good. And especially the JV team when they were undefeated. We went undefeated this year. Now, some questions to await with them, how they do when they go up a division. Could you just imagine next year the White if this were a division? I'll talk about that in a minute. But with Rochester, obviously Max Moe, Jake Tandy, Logan Pleasant. They've got others on that team that's been really good for them. Rochester is a really dangerous team right now. And they're a program, winning their first district, I think, since 2015. It tells you the job that Coach Nick Abola's done with that team, getting them back to, where they've been at, since the, obviously with Rochester, they've been down for a while, but now they're back up. And for them to knock off Adams, our arch rival, says a lot. Says a lot with them, especially in a buzzer beater. You got to give Adams a lot of credit this year, especially with the way that they've been. I know Trent Lagarde had a really nice year. They lose Luke Marcial. Those are going to be two big losses for Adams. Obviously overcoming the Langdon brothers situation where they both transferred out to UAD Jesuit. And I didn't like how that went down over there with those two going over to UAD Jesuit. You kind of question the transfer rule with them. Now you're gonna have to really question, their transfer going forward. You're gonna have to I think you got to question all transfers going forward now. Obviously you look at the Langen Brothers situation. To me, that's clearly an athletic motivated transfer. There's clear evidence. So when I look at Rochester, you look at the seniors they lose. They lose Keenan Mall. That's going to be a tough loss. They do lose Jake Tandy. That's going to be a big loss. But they have program strength to make up for those losses. And if you're Coach Nick Abola, you love your situation where you're at right now, because you not only are built for this year, you're built for next year. You're built for 2 years. You might be even built for 3 years. And we don't know the middle school system yet. We don't know what they have over at Ruther, what they have at West. We don't know. I think those are the middle school feeding systems that go to Rochester. So there's a lot to like for Coach Nick Abola. For Adams next year, I think they're going to be fine. Yes, they're going to have to they lose Trent Lagarde, which is a big loss. Yes, they do lose. They do lose Luke Marcial. But you got Cannon Flint coming back. That's going to be big for them. They did knock out Stony Creek. Got their revenge on them. It was a 46-44, 48-46 win for them over Stony Creek. Stony Creek, in my opinion, I think, has got more questions than answers when you look at them. And there's a lot more to figure out with them compared to, when you look at others. But I think, to me, you look at next year, they got Anthony Aragos coming back. You do have Charlie Carson coming back. You do got, you got Quentin Urbai coming back. There's just there's a lot of questions. A lot of questions with Stony Creek. And I forgot to mention with North Farmington, in North Farmington's case, they do lose Rob Smith. That's a big loss for them. But Todd Negoshian's done a really nice job building that program over there. So, he'll be fine. I think North Farmington will be fine heading into next year, but they got to find some playmakers for sure. So that'll be something to really watch for heading into next year when it comes to North Farmington. But back to Stony Creek here. And I think for them, there's so many question marks with Stony Creek that, you got to figure some things out. There's really some things that, they got to figure out and quick. And if they don't figure it out quick, they could be in some trouble. That's really what it is with them, is can they figure things out? They're still likely to be in the blue next year. They could be in the gold. I don't know. That depends if the league goes 4 divisions. So there's going to be a lot of question marks with Stony Creek. What do you do with them? You got program strength, but something is amiss there. I don't know what's clicking between the JV and the varsity. If it's fresh from JV, I don't know. But something is seriously wrong over at Stony Creek when it comes to boys program. Something is seriously wrong there. So that'll be something to keep an eye on this offseason with Stony Creek. So Rochester moves on to take on Waterford Mott in the regional semifinals over at Rochester Adams. So we'll preview that in a little bit. Then we have the district at Royal Oak. Who would have ever thought Troy Athens would win this district? I certainly didn't expect Troy Athens to win the district. I certainly didn't. And I admit that. What Troy Athens did against arch rival Troy was pretty remarkable. They had a great fourth quarter against them. They kept Mason Parker in check. Mason Parker got in some foul trouble. They did a really good job against him. They shut down Andrew Lake, shut down Leo Pinoza. They held Troy to 44 points. That says something. You look at what Coach Gary Fralick loses. You lose those four, put Jack Sabaka. I mean, that's going to be hard to replace. I mean, you have is Blake Kuiper coming back. There's a lot of issues for Troy next year. They've got some issues. Yes, they're a scrappy team. They're going to be very competitive, but I don't know if it's going to result in wins and losses. Program strength's a concern for Troy heading into next year. So there's a lot of concerns, a lot of question marks for Troy next year. Just a lot of question marks for them. Berkeley. When you look at Berkeley, I mean, Berkeley's a team that I got some questions. I mean, this year they struggled with injuries. Program strength's always been solid over there for Berkeley for Coach Joe Sermo. So I think they're going to be okay. I think Berkeley will be fine. So we'll see what happens there with them. Royal Oak. When I look at Royal Oak, they had a nice year. They had a young nucleus. They lose Nick Hoffman. That's a big loss. It's going to be a big loss for Coach Aaron Smith. But they got the majority of their team coming back. I mean, Sam Keller's been really good for them. TJ Harrison's been really good for them. I mean, Royal Oak's going to be back. I think playing tough competition should help them next year. If you're Coach Aaron Smith, I'm scheduling tough competition. I'm scheduling those top teams. That's going to get me ready to go for the postseason. Because now you had a good taste of it. Program strength's a big concern for Coach Smith over there, so that's something to really watch for with them. Now let's talk about the district champion, Troy Athens. What a year for Coach Mitchell Versalino in his first year, taking over for Dave Scott. You look at, and I think if there was an MVP of that district, it's Corbin Crum. Crum was a man possessed in that district. He was. He had a big game against Troy. He had a big game against Royal Oak. Troy Athens had to come back against Royal Oak, considering it was a defensive game, defensive slugfest. I mean, you've really got to look at what Troy Athens is. You look at the season they had, it was not an easy year for them. I mean, they played some really good competition, and they pulled off two really good wins against arguably the top two teams in the district in Troy and Royal Oak. Now, you look at what Troy Athens got to go through, who they got coming up. It's a tough matchup. They got to play Warren De La Salle. So we're going to preview that one. And they play over at Troy. So, interesting to see, that Rochester's playing at their arch rival school. And Troy Athens is playing at their arch rival school. So, you kind of think about and say, okay, how's this going to work? How's it going to work? So, we'll see. But Troy Athens, you look at with them, program strength's on the rise. Their JV team was really good this year. Their freshman was really good this year. I think for me with them, it's going to come down to is, can the Redhawks keep everything going? That's the thing. That's the question mark. You look at Troy Athens, they could be a scary team. They could be. Especially next year. Yes, they lose a lot of talent, but they got a lot of talent from the JV coming up. We know how good that team's been. Could you just imagine next year, hypothetically, not going to confirm this yet, but could you just imagine a division with Oxford, Lake Orion, Troy Athens, in Rochester. That would be a heck of a division. And then West Bloomfield. That would be a crazy division. That would be really insane. Or in Adams. Like I said, so much parity. That'd be really crazy, really intense. It'd be a fun division if that were a division next year. It would be a really fun one. So now let's look at the rest of the districts where we recap before we preview the divisions of the regionals. When you look at the district over at Groves, Groves basically gave that game away against Permian Brother Rice. They basically did. And, and I think, you look at Groves up 10 late in the game, and then you let former Farmington standout Greg Grays go off. You let him go off. And I don't know how to say this. I just don't know how to describe it. Groves basically gave that game away. It almost reminded me of the football game last year in the state semifinals for Groves when they lost to Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Eerily similar. Groves had a chance to win. Couldn't hit free throws. Then let Greg Grays go off. He hits the winning three. And then hits the winning three. And then I think he had like 7 points in the last 30 seconds. I don't know how to say this. I mean, it can't. I mean, Groves was leading by 10 at the 3 quarters. We're up by 10 at the 3. And then Birmingham Brother Rice made a run. So now you look at what Groves next year, they lose a lot. I think the only one back is Bo Kennard. And that says something. That tells you how much Groves really put into this year. You lose Paul Hubbard, John Simpson, Josh Gibson, Landon McKinney. They lose a lot. It's going to be hard for Coach Mark West next year. It's going to be really, really hard. Be really, really hard for them. It's going to be really hard. Seaholm, of course, they lose. They do lose Charlie Gorsica. They got a nice nucleus coming back. I think the future's bright for Seaholm. I really do. They had a really tough loss in the first round to Bloomfield Hills. Bloomfield Hills is a team, I think they're going to be on the upside next year. They got a lot coming back. They only lose 2 seniors. Bulk of their scoring's back, though. They got a lot coming back. So I expect Bloomfield Hills to be back in the conversation. I expect Seaholm to be back. I think both those teams are going to be solid next year. Oak Park, they've got some concerns. Oak Park's got some big concerns. Really concerned with that program over there for Coach Durant Shepard. Really concerned. And then you have A&T. A&T was up and down this year. Still a pretty young team for Coach Terrence Porter. I mean, they were still a very young team. I expect to be better next year. I do. I expect to be much better next year. Let's go to District 25 at West Bloomfield. Basically, Orchard Lake St. Mary's won this district, knocking off West Bloomfield, 69-44. West Bloomfield, they do lose they lose a couple. They lose some key pieces. They lose Chris Britton. That's a big loss. I mean, Corey Pittman. That's a big loss. They lose Brendan Jones. That's a big loss there. I mean, they really struggled this year. And I don't know if there is any upside for them next year. I don't know. Program strength didn't look great. So could this be a team that might have to go down a division? I don't know. But West Bloomfield, they got some concerns. They've got some big concerns heading into next year. Big concerns. So we'll see what happens. But West Bloomfield, there is a lot of questions for them. Really is. And then there's the district over at David at Lapeer. I'll be flat out honest with you. I did not expect Oxford to go out in the district semifinals to Davison. I give Davison a lot of credit for that game against Oxford, winning 49-42, limiting Jake Champagne to 25 points. But they shut everybody else down besides Jake. And I didn't expect, I know I watched the ABC 12 broadcast of Davison after they beat Lapeer, calling themselves the Junkyard Dogs. They had that win against Lapeer, 65-51. And then for them to hold Oxford to 8 points in the fourth quarter says a lot about their defense. And for them offensively, they put up 16 points. So you really look at what Davison, what they did was they limited Oxford, and then they went on to run themselves. But then you look at next year for Oxford, oh boy. You lose 8 seniors. You lose Luke Stolfen, Jake Champagne, Drew Cady. I mean, and that's just the bulk of your score. I mean, Brendan Elling comes back, but now he becomes your main focal point if you're Coach Joe Fedoracek. Dave's ended up losing the Grand Blank in the district final. But Oxford, they put everything on for this year. Finished the year at 21-1. Finished the year at 22-2. 21-2. So, a lot of questions next year. Program strength is a big concern for Oxford. It is a huge concern for them. So, we'll see. See what happens. We'll see what happens. District 27 over at Waterford, over at Avondale. Waterford Mott won this district, knocking off Avondale on a buzzer beater. Winning on a defensive stand, winning 46-45. Mott will move on to take on Rochester. Mott, we know what they got. Obviously, with Jacoby Manyweathers, Greg Ort, who hit the buzzer beater against Lake Orion. I'll talk about that game in a minute, because I thought that game was just horribly officiated in that one. But Waterford Mott's defense was really good in the last game and a half. I mean, limited Lake Orion offensively, and then knocked off a really good Avondale team, kept them off balance. So when you look at Waterford Mott, obviously, they got some defenders. I mean, Troy Robinson, Desmond Stevens. They're not bad defensively. They're not bad at all. They're really not. Keeping an Avondale team when you had Jordan Clayton, you had Jacoby Loris, Justin Greer Sykes, keeping them in check, that's impressive. Really impressive. And then the Lake Orion game, they held Zach Parks to 6 points. Now, I thought that game was terribly officiated, though, in that game. I really thought there were some questionable calls there. But Lake Orion had chances after Ort's shot. They were called for a technical. Nate Giacalone made 1 of 2. And they had another opportunity to possibly try to win it, but didn't throw a really good out-of-bounds play, though. And that was it. So, Waterford Mott survived that one 41-40 against Lake Orion. Avondale knocked out Clarkston 58-51 to get there. Beat Clarkson beat Clarkson 3 times this year. Clarkson's going to be interesting to watch this offseason because there's some question marks with them. Yes, Cole Charter's back. Hayden Barlow's back. Hayden Flavin, we don't know if he's coming back, considering with football. I mean, you look at on Lake Orion's side of things, you don't know same thing with Ryan Rushell. But Lake Orion's got a lot coming back, even though they lose 8 seniors. I mean, Nate Giacalone, Jackson Shosky, Will Farmer are going to be, and Max Nearing, are your 4 catalysts next year. So Lake Orion, I think, is going to be a team to really keep an eye on. Clarkston, obviously you look at with Cole Charter, you look at Hayden Barlow, you look at you lose Quinn Rosenberg, you lose John Call. There's going to be 2 big losses right there for you. There's a lot of questions for Coach Tim Wasilic. A lot of questions. Program strength at Clarkston, not necessarily strong, but their freshmen went unbeaten. But their JV was up and down this year. So that's a question mark for me with Clarkston heading into next year. So they're going to be a team to keep an eye on. Avondale, same thing. Kobe Lora's coming back. That's going to be big for them, for Coach Jared Thomas. So Avondale, I expect them to be back next year. I expect Lake Orion to be back next year. I expect Clarks to be in there next year. Waterford Kettering really struggled this year. And a very young team. They got Joe Jarrell coming back. They lose at least 3 seniors for Coach Steve Emmert. So that'll be something to really watch for. Be really something to watch for. Then we go to Division II, District 62 at Pontiac. Notre Dame Prep ended up winning that district, knocking out Pontiac 55-52. Pontiac had a really nice year. I mean, getting the district final. This is a tough loss in Notre Dame Prep. I think Pontiac, if they can build program strength, I mean, especially with their 8th grade class, going to be freshman next year, they could be in line to have a run. They could be in line to make some noise. I mean, Coach Washington's had a really nice year for them. I mean, they've had a really nice year. So that'll be something to really watch for. Is can Pontiac, overcome, can they keep building on their program strength? That's going to be the big question for them, is keeping on building that program strength. So that's a big question heading in for next year. We'll see. And then we look at the district over at Warren Lincoln, over at Detroit Purging, where Ferndale and Ferndale U were both at. Ferndale University knocked off Hazel Park 48-44. I take the back, I was at Hazel Park. They knocked off Hazel Park 48-44. Great win for them. But then, getting sentenced by Warren Lincoln, that was going to be tough. And that's what happened. It was going to be tough, and it was tough for them. So 48-44 in that one in favor of with Ferndale U knocking off Hazel Park, losing to Warren Lincoln, 78-44 was that score. Ferndale is more disappointed with, losing Detroit Purging 63-60. Now you got to start questioning Coach Juan Rickman when it comes to non-conference. You got to start questioning now. Because you look at this team, yes, they got Ethan Vineyard, they got Torrento Adams, but there's so many questions. You rely a lot on Vineyard to carry you. The schedule is difficult. The non-conference. Now you got to start questioning Coach Juan Rickman's scheduling. You got to start questioning it now. You really got to. So now you got to really start questioning. See what happens. But you got to really start questioning now. You really got to. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, you really got to start questioning. And then there's Harper Woods going out to over at in their district. They lost a tough one to East Point 53-49. They got a really good promising freshman in Lana West and in West. I think he's going to be the real deal for Coach Tawan Porter. But for Harper Woods, they clearly struggled this year. They really, really struggled. And how do you explain it? How do you explain it? A lot of questions. A lot of questions for them heading into the offseason. I think they're probably going to be in the blue next year. I think they're going to be. But we'll see. We'll see how realignment goes, how the league realigns the divisions. So we'll see what happens. Let's preview the regional matchups now. Rochester, Waterford, Adams. Interesting matchups in the guards between Max Muller and Jacoby Manyweathers. Should be really interesting. Jake Tandy has a big game. Who knows what could happen? I still would have to take Mott in this one because of the interior matchup. The wings, obviously. But if Logan Pleasant has a big game, more capable, if he's the X factor there, it wouldn't surprise me if Waterford Mott gets upset. It really wouldn't surprise me. The unfortunate part is that winner's going to take on Orchard Lake St. Mary's or Grand Blanc, which is more likely going to be Orchard Lake St. Mary's because of who they got. And that's going to be really, really tough. Then you have Troy Athens. They're going to take on Warren D. LaSalle at Troy. Again, another tough matchup. Warren D. LaSalle's got Phoenix Glass now. Troy Athens, they're going to have to defend well. I don't know. If Troy Athens pulls off the upset, they somehow pull off an upset, you're probably staring at Macomb, Lutheran North, or Chippewa Valley. I'd be stunned if Troy Athens were to upset Warren D. LaSalle. Troy Athens, they're playing house money now. They're playing with house money. They really are. And then Farmington taking on Wayne Memorial. Obviously, we know what Wayne's got. 3 really good players. But it'll be a really tall order for Farmington. Even if they play team ball, it'll be really, really tough. And that winner's either going to take on UD Jesuit or Birmingham Brother Rice. Oh, boy. I don't know if the OA can make it to Thursday. I don't know if they can make it to the regional final. I don't know. We'll see. If not, you'll probably see the shortcomings come out maybe sometime this week. So we'll see what happens. Now let's go from the boys' side. Let's talk about the girls, recapping the divisions this week. League play, obviously. Some teams to really keep an eye on as we head into the districts for them. One game I really got to talk about is Troy against Utica Ford 2. Now, this was a game that Troy picked up, I think, later in the week. Ended up being a heck of a game for Troy to pick up. It's a game against Utica Henry Ford 2. And Troy ended up stunning the entire league and won this game 45-43 over the Falcons. I'm looking at the score, I'm going like, what? How is it possible? I mean, and this was all before, you look at what happened at the Elimination Chamber WWE, of course, with John Cena turning heel. But I'm looking at the score, I'm saying to myself, Troy winning over Ford. Ford shared the MAC red with Utica Eisenhower. This is the same team that does not have Diamond Prince on there. She's out for the year with knee surgery. And yet they go in and stun Henry Ford on their home floor. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. The same Troy team that went through, really, they had a tough non-conference. Started off slow. Lose Diamond Prince to an injury. She comes back, plays a couple games. Then she has to get surgery on her knee. Macy Zeider had a big game for them. Macy Zeider, she's had, I know she's got a lot of hype surrounding her. But, There were games where she played really well, and there's the games she played like a freshman. There were games she struggled. But, I think the prodigy is still there for Troy with Macy Zider. The prodigy's still there. You kind of look at Macy Zider and you think Anakin Skywalker. You kind of think of that. The reason why I say this is simple. Because I know a lot of people viewed her as the chosen one. A lot of people viewed her as that. A lot of people compared her to her sister Kendall. But, and I know Kendall's first year, she did struggle a little bit. Her sophomore year, she got much better. We know what happened her junior and senior years. So I'm not saying that's the path that Macy will take. But you could tell. I mean, she's made some strides this year. She's made some strides the last few games. So I'm comparing Macy Zider to Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one. We know what happened with Anakin Skywalker. But you look at Troy next year, they're going to be loaded. They got Diamond Prince back. You got Macy Zider. You got Carly Higginbottom. So Coach Laura Goodman's got something going. The win against Ford is a statement win for them. I mean, that was... But now they get to play Troy Athens in the first round. They could be my most dangerous team in the district. Could they get Berkeley a game? I think they could. But they got to get by Athens. That's really going to be the key for them. That's going to be the key. There's some interesting games here on the docket here, on the girls' side of things. Keep an eye on. I mean, Bloomfield Hills and Groves, they play again. I mean, they played last Tuesday. We know how good Harlem Simpson's been for them. Harlem Simpson's been, I think, it's going to be, she could be that next great scorer for Groves. She's got a lot of talent. Her and JC Roy and I think Sophie Swick could be the next great threesome in Beverly Hills. They could be. They pretty well could be. Bloomfield Hills, obviously, with Brianna Young. They are a senior-heavy team, though. So we'll see what happens in that one. That should be a really interesting one. Adams Romeo looks interesting. Adams Romeo looks really interesting. Clash of different styles. Romeo's played against some OAA teams before. They played Stony Creek. They played Lake Orion. That winner's getting Eisenhower. And I think, and I'm not sold on Ike right now. I'm really not. So that should be a fun matchup. Clash of different styles. Other upsets, you kind of look at, West Bloomfield over Clarkston. You kind of really, I don't consider that an upset at all. Lake Orion over Stony Creek, I don't consider that an upset at all. I think that, Oxford over Ferndale, I don't consider that an upset at all. So when you look at the divisional race to finish up the year, in the gold, Farmington winning that one, not a surprise that they won the division. But I was surprised when I read the rosters of everybody. A lot of freshmen and sophomores are on all four of those teams. When you look at Farmington, Ferndale University, Pontiac, and Oak Park. Pontiac's got everybody coming back. Ferndale University's got the bulk of their team come back. Oak Park, they got the bulk of their team coming back. And then Farmington, they got the bulk of their team coming back. So when you look at those four teams, they got a lot of experience, but the question is it going to be the talent level? That's the big question, is especially when you look at Farmington, who's going to have to play, they got to play Livonia Franklin. If they win that, then they're going to have to play against Farmington Hills Mercy, and we know how good the Marlins are. That'll be a difficult matchup. Oak Park's got to play Hamtramck. That's a difficult matchup. They somehow get by that, then you're staring at Detroit Renaissance in the face. And then Ferndale U, they're playing Madison Lights Lamprey. That could be a really interesting game. Pontiac's playing, I think, Macomb Lutheran North. That winner's taking on Birmingham Detroit Country Day. So really tough matchups for all the teams in the gold. Probably the exception of Ferndale U, who's got to take on Madison Heights Lampier. So that could be really, really interesting to see how that one goes. In the blue, Avondale won that division. A&T, I think A&T was second. Berkeley was second. A&T was third. I think Adams was fourth. Adams was fourth. I think Humber Woods was fifth. Athens sixth, and North Farmington seventh. So when I look at North Farmington, young group, young team, had some good wins. They got a tough matchup with Birmingham Marion in the district. So Coach Michael Allen's got that team believing they got a really young nucleus leading them. I think they could be a team to watch for in the future is North Farmington. They could be a team to really watch for. Troy Athens, we know they lose some key pieces, but their future is bright. Their program strength is solid for Coach J.C. Klump. Difficult matchup against Troy, so that should be a fun matchup. That should be really interesting. We'll see what happens there. Adams mentioned the Romeo game. That should be really interesting. But the bulk of their team is junior heavy. Faith Solis and Jordan Jarrell coming back next year is going to be big. But Adams has had a lot of kids play for Coach Joe Malberg. So we'll see if they can make another deep run. I mean, I think if things go right in the cards, I think Adams, if they get by Romeo, they're going to give Ike problems. If they get by, and I think they can get by Ike. If they get the district final, that's a heck of an accomplishment for Coach Joe Malberg. I mean, considering the direction that he's got that team going, trying to build program strength can be a challenge for them. But that'll be something to really watch for going forward. Harper Woods, they got a really interesting matchup coming up with St. Clair Shore South Lake. But getting to 10 wins, having a winning record, that's big for them. Only playing 19 games. So that says a lot. Really does. And then we look at A&T. A&T's had an incredible year. A&T had the number 1 seed in their district. Big win against Berkeley. They have, Christian Banks has played well. Jordan Ushery's played well for Coach Shakita Coltrane. A&T, despite the lack of numbers, Coltrane takes advantage of the 5-quarter rule, uses it to perfection. So A&T right now, if I had to say with A&T, they're doing something right there. But it'll be interesting to see what they do next season when they lose Ushery and Banks. Those are going to be some big challenges for them going forward. So that'll be something to really watch for with them. Berkeley has the number 1 seed in their district. Facing either Troy or Troy Athens. Troy Athens, they know quite well. Troy, I don't think they know quite well. I think if they get Troy, it's a very difficult matchup for them because of Macy Zider, the way she's been playing. And obviously the senior class, they're playing with nothing to lose, everything to gain. So Berkeley, number 1 seed, heading to their arch rivals court. That should be interesting. So we'll see what happens there. But Berkeley, interesting spot heading into the postseason with them. And then you look at Avondale. Avondale, of course, winning the division this year. They do lose a lot. They do lose, Amira Daniel. They lose Madison Manyweathers. They lose Morgan McPherson. Those are going to be 3 big losses for them. For Coach Roy Krishman. I know Sasha McClellan's coming back. And they got to play Lake Orion first, which is going to be really interesting considering they beat them earlier in the year. But that was without Charlotte Poblaski. So it'll be interesting to see how Avondale does this time around against the Dragon team. I think it's been playing much better. But Lake Orion did take a big injury hit with Riley House being out for the year with an ACL/MCL tear. So that's going to be something to really watch for over at Clarkston. between Lake Orion and Avondale. How do the Dragons and Yellow Jackets match up? So that should be really interesting to see how that one goes. So we'll see how it goes. In the white this year, Rochester winning that division. You had Seaholm, Groves, Royal Oak, Bloomfield Hills. Were in that conversation this year. Rochester winning the division, going unbeaten this year. They do lose two big pieces in Alice Max and Kylie Robinson. Those are going to be two big losses. Taylor Parsons really emerged as a star for them at the guard spot. Program strength looks to be solid for Coach Andy Toppy. So it'll be interesting to see what Rochester does next year when they're most likely going to have to go up the red to see the red heavyweights. So, but when you look at Rochester, the year they've had, I mean, they've had some tough losses. They do have that win against Lake Orion, which is huge for them. Tough loss to Stony Creek. They're the number 2 seed in their district. Most likely going to see Stony Creek in the district semifinal, which that could be really interesting considering, Rochester's going to have to wear white. Stony Creek probably will have to wear blue or gold. I mean, because Stony Creek has had a history of wearing gold historically. So that could be a really interesting matchup between the Cougars and the Falcons for the right to challenge either Utica Eisenhower, Rochester Adams, or Romeo. I'm just not sold on Ike. I'm really not. Considering, you look at, yes, they shared the MAC Red with Utica Ford, but I just don't know if these freshmen that they have over there, especially Turner Twins, are ready for the postseason, what it brings. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. So, but with Rochester, they're battle tested. They got experience, especially with Max and Robinson. They have a district championship under their belt. So that'll be something to really watch for in this postseason. And also heading into next year, of course, Rochester JV was really good last year, was really good this year. So, so I think they're going to make some noise this year. So we'll see what happens with them. Groves, I mentioned with Harlan Simpson, they're going to be really good. JC Roy, Sophia Startnick for Coach Jessica Dibla. Bloomfield Hills will be an interesting matchup. It's a divisional game. They play twice. They split in the regular season. So, should be a fun one. But Groves, program strength's a big concern. I'm concerned about their interior. So, a lot of questions next year for Groves when it comes to that department. Program strength's a big concern for me when I look at Groves. Royal Oak, unusual year for them, finishing around 500. I mean, really unusual for them. They do lose Lucy Furtag, they lose Maddie Lawrence, so they're going to be two big losses. Lydia Dickens back for them. That's going to be huge for Coach Brian Zapata. Program strength's a big concern for me when I look at Royal Oak. They only had 2 programs this year. Normally, this is a team that usually has 3 programs. So I expect Royal Oak to be back into the conversation when it comes to building those 3 programs. We know how good of a job Zapata's done with the program there at Royal Oak. So that'll be something to really watch for going forward there. I know they got to play Warren Mott in the first round on their home floor. Odd to believe Royal Oak could be wearing black in that one against Warren Mott. But I think Royal Oak matches up pretty well with the Marauders. So that should be really interesting to see how that one goes. But I think Royal Oak matches up pretty well with them. It wouldn't surprise me if Royal Oak does beat Warren Mott, considering Royal Oak's had playoff experience, winning a district last year. I know Warren Mott's had a really nice year, but I just don't see how Warren Mott's going to knock off Royal Oak. I'd be really shocked if that were the case. I mean, like, if that happened, I'd be really, really shocked, especially on Royal Oak's home floor, considering, everything that, Royal Oak's been through this season. So a lot to really look at with them. Bloomfield Hills, as I mentioned, they do lose a lot of talent. You lose Giselle Haddad. You do lose Brianna Young. Bree Brooks is going to be a key player next year for Coach Ronaldo Brown. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there with Bloomfield Hills. So that'll be something to really watch for as we head into the they got to play Groves first, so it should be a fun matchup. They win that, you know what I mean? You're probably staring at Seaholm, which is going to be interesting. Of course, Seaholm, we know, is no stranger to both these two teams. So we'll see what happens. And then there's Seaholm. Seaholm, to me, when I look at Seaholm, expectations were high. Didn't meet them. They struggled middle part of the year, struggled in league play. Don't know what happened with them. But a lot of questions heading in this postseason tournament for them. I mean, they talk district championship. They want to win the district championship. Now you got some pressure on you. So this is going to be interesting to see how Coach Chris Manchester handles this. You do got the bye. They have to wait either Groves or Bloomfield Hills. Oh, no, take that back. They would play either Birmingham, Marion, or North Farmington. The Groves and A&T win. The Groves and Bloomfield Hills winner takes on A&T. So really, I owe an apology when it comes to bracket matchups. So, so that should be really interesting to see how Seaholm would play. If they can knock out Birmingham, Marion, that's a big deal, especially on their home floor. So that should be really interesting to see how that one goes. So we'll see how that one goes for them. But Seaholm, a lot of pressure on them. Can they win the big one? That's the big question. I mean, that's something to really keep an eye on going forward is can they win the big one? If they win the big one, then they've met some part of their expectations, but not winning league title this year, especially with that heavy senior class they have. A lot to say when you look at Seaholm going forward. So there's a lot of question marks with them, especially heading into the next year. So we'll see what happens there with them. Then to the red, Ferndale. Oh boy. Program strength is a serious issue for Ferndale. It is. They changed coaches mid-season. And they lose Demi Bolton. You don't know about Anaya Davis. You don't know about their freshman stars. You don't know what they have coming back. Yes, they got the top seed in their district. They should win the district, considering, they've been through a tough schedule. They've been through a lot of things tough. But Coach Pettaway's done a nice job with that team. He's done a really nice job building that foundation. It comes to getting players, that's going to be the key going forward for them. Can they get players? That's the key. You've seen the transfer route. Didn't work out for them. So now they're going to have to build talent based on homegrown talent. So that'll be something to really watch for. Obviously, program strength is a big concern. That'll be something to watch this offseason for Ferndale. They have Centerline first, so they should win that against Centerline. Then Ferndale U is going to be a trap game for them. I think Ferndale U might be a difficult game for them going up. I mean, like if they get by Mass Heights Lampier. So that could be a trap game for Ferndale. So with the lack of depth. So that could be a serious problem. Despite playing in a tougher conference in the red. So that could be really interesting, really difficult. So we'll see what happens going forward. But Ferndale right now, tough spot. We'll see where they're at right now. We're going to see where they're at. Stony Creek. When I look at the Cougars, tough loss against Lake Orion. Then they bounce back on their senior night, knocking off Foot Carmen Ainsworth. Now they got to play Utica. Should get by Utica. You should get by Utica. If you get upset by Utica, then the problems at Stony Creek are much worse than thought. Because Stony Creek should win that game against Utica. Then they have Rochester, which is going to be really interesting. If they win that, you got Utica, Eisenhower, Adams, or Romeo. They beat Romeo, they beat Adams. Utica, Eisenhower would be a really interesting matchup. I still take Stony Creek in that game if they did play Utica, Eisenhower because of the experience. You have Merrick Schlaw back there. You have the Avage sisters. I mean, they've been through it all. They've been through it. They won a district title last year. You got Michaela Genrich. You have Taylor Fulkerson. You have Sam Fulkerson. I mean, if Stony Creek doesn't win this district, then there's going to be a big, big question mark for Coach Columbus Williams. And I know there's something going on over there. Really is. It's something to watch. Program strength's a concern for Coach Columbus Williams. It really is. They've got some things to address this offseason. They've got some serious questions this offseason. But we'll see what they have. Oxford. Rough year for them this year. 3 different coaches in a span of one summer. Trevor Marshall took over that program. Up and down year. Somehow they got the number 2 seed. Probably staring at Davison in the district semifinals. Staring at Davison. Could be really interesting. They win that. Staring at Grand Blanc in the district final. They lose Allison Hofstadler and Sophia Robb. You lose Emma Beggs. You lose you lose Caitlin Brockway. They lose some key pieces. Mia Champagne's back. Actually, no, it's Brittany Cardona, my bad. Caitlin Brockway's back for the next year. Oxford's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. Really interesting. We'll see what happens. See what happens with them. Program strength looks solid for Coach Trevor Marshall. They just need stability. They can have stability. I think the summer's huge for Oxford. I really do. So we'll see what happens with them. We're going to see what happens. But this summer is extremely critical for Oxford. I mean, they have to play a lot of basketball this summer. If they do, they're going to be better than people think. Now, a team that really needs to play basketball this summer is Lake Orion. Because you look at the Dragons, you lose 3 players in Izzy Walensky, Charlotte Peplowski, and Mel Guccione. But this is a young basketball team. When you look at, you have players like Lala Hill, you have Kara Veter. You have some promising players in the making. You have Jasmine Randolph, you have Audrey Heist, you have Elizabeth Crawford, Brooke Armstrong. Bottom line for Coach Bob Bridges is this summer is the key. Because you can't have what's been going on the last 2 years. You can't have that. When it comes to commitment issues, you can't have it. This team has got to play a lot of basketball this summer. They have to. You look at the district they got. I mean, Avondale's an interesting matchup for them. Lost them earlier in the year. You win that game, you get Sarah Clarkson right in the face. Clarkson's won both games against Lake Orion this year. Should be an interesting matchup if that were the case, but Avondale's a really tough team for them. Izzy Walensky is going to have to be the key in that one. You got Charlotte Peplowski. She's the bigger key in that one. The loss of Riley House is huge for this team. Especially when you look at next year when it comes to leadership role. I know Danny Heck's one of them. But it'll be interesting to see what Lake Orion does. But this summer for them is the key. This summer, this team has got to play a lot of basketball. I mean, this team's got to play a lot of basketball. They got to bond. I mean, clearly. If this team can play a lot of basketball this offseason, and I think Lake Orion could surprise some people next year. They could really well do. And then there's Clarkston. When you look at the Wolves, they had a young team this year, won the Red. They lose some key pieces in Marley Mazer and Elia Munger and Elia Hernandez. They got Eliana Roback coming back. Brooklyn Cobra's coming back. The Bond Sisters coming back. Clarkston's going to be back in the conversation. And they're going to be in the conversation for the foreseeable future. They're in that conversation. Waterford first. Should win that. Better be careful of Sophia Sartonis. If Sophia Sartonis plays well in that one, then that could be really dangerous for Clarkson. And then you look at possibly playing Lake Orion or Avondale. Clarkson beat both of them this year. So we'll see what happens there. But Clarkson right now is in a really nice spot. And there's Waterford. Of course, Waterford, still in the Lakes Valley. Struggled this year. They were up and down this year. Star player in the making is Sylvia Sertonis. They lose some key players for Coach Andrew Woolman. But Waterford, it'll be interesting to see how they perform. We'll know a lot about it this year. We'll know about it in the postseason. So we'll see what happens going forward. All right, I'm going to sign off here. I'd like to send my congratulations to Stony Creek Cheerleading for winning the Division I State Championship. Also, good seasons from Rochester and Rochester Adams as well. All right, I'm going to sign off here. Make sure you follow the blog at SignAwayForThisVideo at blogspot.com. Keep an eye on the shortcomings for both girls and boys basketball. So we'll see what happens. Take care, God bless, and I'll see y'all next week. Take care, God bless. See y'all next week. God bless.